She was on her 43rd stop of the night when he saw it. 2:14 a.m. A Columbus warehouse that smelled like cardboard and cold air and the specific exhaustion of a building that never fully stopped. Maya Chen was at the receiving desk, scanning a package, her jacket unzipped from the heat of carrying, her head down, her hands moving with the automatic precision of someone who had done this 10,000 times and could do it 10,000 more. Daniel Reeves saw the necklace before he saw her face. A small silver ginkgo leaf on a thin chain, catching the warehouse light for exactly 1 second as she leaned forward to sign the screen. He stopped walking. Not slowed. Stopped. His clipboard hit the floor. He didn't pick it up, because that necklace had been in his hands on a Tuesday afternoon in 2016 in a hospital room in Columbus, Ohio, and he had placed it in the palm of his wife's hand and closed her fingers around it and said, "I'll see you tomorrow." He had not seen her tomorrow. He had spent 8 years not knowing where that necklace had gone. It had gone here, to the neck of a woman he had never met, on her 43rd stop of the night, at 2:14 in the morning, in a warehouse he owned and had not visited in 14 months, and had walked into tonight only because tomorrow was the anniversary, and the house was too quiet to stay in. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was already reaching for the next package. 7 years of night shifts had taught Maya Chen that momentum was the only thing that carried you through hour 9 of 10, when your back had an opinion and your feet had a louder one. And the list still had 43 names on. She didn't stop. He couldn't move. Maya Chen's alarm went off at 9:30 p.m., not AMP. She had set it that way for 7 years. The phone on the nightstand, face down because the screen light disturbed her sleep. The alarm labeled, not wake up, but go. A small private distinction that mattered to her, in a way she had never explained to anyone, because explaining it would have required explaining things she didn't have language for yet. Go, not wake up, because waking up implied you had been somewhere restful. Most nights, she had not been somewhere restful. She had been in the specific, shallow sleep of someone whose body knew it had 4 hours and was rationing accordingly. Go anyway. She dressed in the dark, the same clothes she always wore for the shift. Thermal underlayer, work pants, with the reinforced knees she had ordered online after the originals wore through at month 8 of year 1. The gray hoodie with the Apex Logistics logo that had faded from washing, but was still warm, which was the only criterion that mattered at 9:30 p.m. in Columbus in November. She checked on Leo before she left. Always Leo first. He slept on his right side, with one arm hanging off the edge of the bed in the specific boneless abandon of a 9-year-old who had not yet learned to be self-conscious about how he occupied space. The nightlight was on. Not because he was afraid of the dark, because Maya had learned early that a child who woke at 2 a.m. in a completely dark apartment with no parent home needed something to orient to, and the nightlight was that something. She stood in the doorway for a moment, counted his breaths. 4, 5. Then she went to the kitchen. The note was on the table. It was always on the table. Leo left it before bed every night she worked. A piece of paper torn from his drawing notebook, folded once, her name on the outside in his careful, slightly oversized handwriting. She had a drawer full of them. She had never thrown one away. Tonight said, "The cat knocked over your plant again." I put the dirt back. Most of it. "Hi, Mom." She read it twice, folded it, put it in her jacket pocket. She did not have a cat. She had a succulent named Gerald, that Leo had named after a character in a book, and that had survived 3 years on the windowsill through some combination of resilience and neglect that Maya found both impressive and personally relatable. The cat was imaginary. A recurring character in Leo's notes that had started 18 months ago, and that she had never questioned because questioning it would have ended it, and she was not ready for it to end. The imaginary cat knocked things over, left dead birds on the doorstep, occasionally expressed opinions about the weather. Leo was 9 years old, and he was funny in the specific, dry way of children who have spent a lot of time with adults and absorbed their timing without losing their own particular angle on things. She put the note in her pocket and went downstairs to the CR-V. The CR-V was a 2011 Honda she had bought in 2019 for $8,400. Not from a dealership, from a man in Westerville who had kept meticulous service records and sold it only because his wife had decided they needed something larger. She had driven it for 4 years before using it for deliveries, and had continued driving it for 3 more after that, which meant it now had 187,000 miles on it and a heating system that worked well on the driver's side and adequately on the passenger side, and a rear door that required a specific lifting motion to close properly that she had taught herself and that she had never gotten around to teaching anyone else because there was nobody else to teach. She had a maintenance notebook for the CRV, not the same as Maya's income notebook, a separate one, specific to the vehicle, tracking every service interval, every repair, every part replaced, and when and at what cost. She kept it in the glove compartment. She updated it after every service, the way some people updated diaries, with the specific ongoing attention of someone who understood that this vehicle was not transportation. It was infrastructure. It was the thing that made everything else possible, and things that made everything else possible required maintenance records. The first stop of the night was a residential drop in Clintonville. Package left on porch, photo taken, time log, 47 seconds from park to back in the car. She had timed herself in year 2 and had worked on the timing until 47 seconds was the floor, not the ceiling. Second stop, third stop. She moved through Columbus in the specific, comprehensive way of someone who knew the city not as a map but as a sequence of addresses and the most efficient path between them. Which streets flooded after rain, which intersections had the light timing that rewarded patience, which apartment complexes had parking that required the CRV to be left on the street, and which had the loading zone that made the difference between a 2-minute stop and a 6-minute one. She knew all of it. 7 years of knowing it, accumulated the way all real knowledge accumulated. Not from study, but from repetition, from consequence, from the specific education of doing something in the real world until the real world feedback shaped you into someone who did it well. By midnight, she had completed 21 stops. She ate the sandwich she had made at 9:15 in the parking lot of a CVS on North High Street, engine running for the heat, the radio on low. She listened to audiobooks on shift, but ate in silence because eating deserved its own attention. And she had learned not to give things less than their due. The sandwich was turkey and cheese on wheat. The same sandwich she had been making for 7 years because it traveled well, held up to temperature variation, and could be eaten in 4 minutes in a parking lot without requiring utensils or a flat surface. Leo had asked her once why she always made the same sandwich. She had said, because it works. He had said, that's what you say about everything. She had thought about that for 3 days. He was not wrong. At 1:47 a.m., she crossed the river into the warehouse district. The last leg of the shift was always commercial, larger packages, loading docks, the specific physical demand of bending and lifting that she managed with the practiced economy of someone who had learned, after a torn rotator cuff in year 3, that the body had a budget and spending it carelessly early in the shift produced a deficit that compounded through hour 9. She pulled into the Apex Logistics warehouse at 2:09 a.m., her 43rd stop. The necklace was on her neck because Leo's had said it was pretty. That was the whole story of it. 6 years ago, she had bought an army green jacket from Goodwill for $7. Good condition, warm lining, exactly what she needed for the ship. She had found the necklace in the inside pocket when she got home. A small silver ginkgo leaf on a thin chain, no note, no receipt. Just there, in the pocket, as though it had always been there and was simply waiting to be found. She had held it for a moment. Then she had put it on the windowsill, next to Gerald the succulent. 3 days later, Leo had picked it up and said, Mom, this is pretty. You should wear it. She had worn it every shift since. She was wearing it when she walked into the Apex Logistics warehouse at 2:09 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, 8 years to the day, after a woman named Sarah Reeves had been brought into an emergency room across town and had not come back out. Maya did not know any of that. She knew only that she had 43 stops done and 11 to go, and the CRV needed an oil change by Friday. And Leo had left a note about an imaginary cat, and the necklace was cold against her collarbone the way it always was in November, and she was going to be home by 5 a.m. if the last 11 stops went smoothly. She walked to the receiving desk. She leaned forward to sign the screen. The warehouse light caught the necklace for exactly 1 second. And a man she had never seen before stopped walking in the middle of the floor and dropped his clipboard and did not pick it up. Daniel Reeves had not planned to be at the warehouse tonight. That was the truth of it. And it mattered, not as an excuse, not as context for what came after, but as the specific, honest fact of a Tuesday night in November when a man who owned a $600 million logistics company drove 40 minutes across Columbus at midnight because the alternative was sitting in a house that had been quiet for 8 years and was loudest on this particular night. Tomorrow was the anniversary. He had never found a word he liked for it. Anniversary implied celebration. Remembrance implied distance. What it actually was, in the specific, unmediated experience of living through it for the 8th time, was simply the night before, the 24 hours in which the city went about its ordinary business and Daniel Reeves moved through it with the specific, effortful normalcy of someone performing fine for an audience that wasn't watching. He had left the house at 11:47 p.m., not with a destination, with a direction. Away from the kitchen where Sarah had made coffee every morning. Away from the living room where her books were still on the shelves in the order she had left them. Away from the bedroom where the window faced east and the morning light came in at the angle she had loved, and that he had not been able to bring himself to block with curtains in 8 years, because blocking, it felt like choosing to not see something she had loved. He had driven. Columbus at midnight in November was the city at its most honest, stripped of the daytime performance of a mid-sized American city that had somewhere to be, reduced to the people and places that existed regardless of audience. The warehouses in the distribution district running their night operations. The hospitals lit against the dark. The specific amber geometry of streetlights on wet pavement after rain. He had driven past the Apex warehouse on Morse Road and had seen the lights on and had pulled in, not because he needed to be there, because being there was better than the alternative, which was continuing to drive through a city that contained, on every street, the specific geography of a life he had shared with someone who was no longer here to share it. Apex Logistics had been Sarah's idea. Not the name, not the specifics. The idea that he should stop working for other people's companies and build one of his own. That specific, direct observation she had made on a Thursday evening in 2013 while he was complaining about a decision his employer had made that he could have made better. Then make better decisions, she had said. Not unkindly. With the specific, matter-of-fact confidence of someone who believed in him more completely than he believed in himself and saw no reason to be diplomatic about it. It's not that simple, he had said. Most things aren't, she had said. Do it anyway. He had spent 2 years planning, had left his job in 2015, had incorporated Apex Logistics in January 2016 with $340,000 in savings and a business plan he had revised 11 times, and that Sarah had read every version of, marking the margins in her small, precise handwriting. Questions, suggestions, the occasional single word that meant more than a paragraph. She had not seen the company open. The accident was in March 2016. A wet road, a truck that crossed the center line, the specific random violence of a moment that had no meaning proportionate to its consequences. She had been driving home from her sister's. She had called him at 4:15 to say she was on her way. He had been on the phone with a vendor. He had let it go to voicemail. He had listened to the voicemail at 4:47, after the hospital had already called. Hey, just leaving Claire's. See you in 40, I love you. He had kept the voicemail. He had listened to it 200 times in the first year and not at all, in years 3 through 6 and once in year 7 when he had not meant to and had needed to sit down after. He had opened Apex Logistics in June 2016, 3 months after the accident, not because he had recovered, because recovering was not the right frame, because the company had been Sarah's idea, and building it was the closest thing to a conversation with her that remained available to him. He had built it well. Not from grief exactly, not from the dramatic fuel of tragedy version of motivation that made for clean stories, from the specific quiet stubbornness of a man who had promised himself in a hospital room on a Tuesday afternoon that he was going to do the thing she had told him to do. He had done it. 3,200 employees, 8 states, $600 million in annual revenue. The company that Sarah had described on a Thursday evening in 2013 while he was complaining about someone else's decisions. He had made the better decisions. She had not been there to see them. That was the specific, irreducible fact at the center of everything. The thing that the revenue and the employees and the eights did not address and were not designed to address, that existed underneath all of it like the foundation of a building that was structurally sound and sitting on ground that would never be entirely stable. She was not here. He walked the warehouse floor at midnight because walking required attention, and attention was the one reliable interruption to the specific circular quality of thought that the anniversary produced. The loop that started with the voicemail and ended with the voicemail and passed through every version of if and what if and why that 8 years had not resolved. He had a clipboard, not because he had come to inspect anything, because carrying a clipboard in a warehouse you owned made the walking look purposeful in a way that helped on nights when purposeful was what he needed to appear to be. He had been walking for 40 minutes when he turned the corner near the receiving desk. He saw her before she saw him, a woman at the desk, leaning forward to sign the screen, jacket unzipped, head down, the automatic, economical movement of someone in the middle of something that required completion. He noted her the way he noted everything in his warehouses, as a presence, as a data point, as one of the 3,200 people whose names he did not know and whose work made the company function. Then the warehouse lights shifted, and he saw the necklace, the specific small silver grinking a leaf on a thin chain that he had bought for $12 at a market stall in Kyoto in 2004, on the first trip he and Sarah had ever taken in together, that she had worn every day from that afternoon until the Tuesday in March 2016, when she had left Claire's and called him and said, "See you in 40." He stopped. The clipboard hit the floor. He did not hear it. He was looking at a necklace on the neck of a stranger in his own warehouse at 2:09 in the morning, and understanding with the specific total clarity of a man who had spent 8 years not knowing where something had gone, that it had gone here, to this woman, to this night, to the 43rd stop of a shift that had started at 9:30 p.m. and would end at 5 a.m., and that this woman had been doing in this city for 7 years, without his knowledge, without his attention, without him having once walked into this building at 2 a.m. and understood what the night operation of his company actually looked like from the inside. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was already reaching for the next package. He looked at the necklace. He looked at his hands. He thought about a Tuesday afternoon in 2016 and a hospital room and his wife's fingers closing around a thin chain and a small silver leaf, and a promise he had made to himself standing in a parking lot afterward that he was going to do the thing she had told him to do. He had done it. He had not done all of it. He was beginning to understand the difference. She noticed the clipboard first, not the man, the clipboard, the specific hollow sound of it hitting concrete in a quiet warehouse at 2:14 a.m., cutting through the ambient hum of the building, the way unexpected sounds cut through ambient hum. Not loud, just wrong. The sound of something that should not have happened. She looked up. A man, standing 15 feet away. Suit, not the kind people wore to warehouse inspections, the kind people wore to meetings where decisions were made. Late 50s. Salt and pepper. The specific stillness of someone who had stopped moving, not because they chose to, but because something had stopped them. He was looking at her neck. Maya's first instinct, developed over 7 years of working alone at 2 a.m. in warehouses and parking lots and apartment building lobbies, was assessment. Rapid, accurate. The specific threat evaluation that women who work nights develop, not from paranoia, but from the practical necessity of understanding every space they enter and every person in it. She assessed him, not a threat. Something else entirely, something she did not have immediate language for, because the expression on his face was not one she had encountered in a warehouse before. Not anger, not recognition in the ordinary sense. Something older and more private than either of those. The expression of a person receiving information that has rearranged something fundamental. "Are you all right?" she said. He didn't answer immediately. She watched him locate himself, the specific, visible process of a man returning from somewhere internal to the physical reality of a warehouse floor. He picked up the clipboard. He looked at it as though he was not entirely sure how it had gotten on the floor. He looked back at her. "Your necklace," he said. His voice was steady. Whatever had happened in the previous 30 seconds, he had contained it, not completely, not with the seamless composure of someone who was fine, but enough to speak. "What about it?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Where did you get it?" he said. She looked at him. The question was specific and direct and delivered without the context that would have made it make sense, without preamble, without apology, for the strangeness of asking a stranger about their jewelry at 2 a.m. in a warehouse. Just the question, standing on its own, carrying a weight she could feel without understanding its source. "I found it," she said. Something moved across his face. "Found it where?" "In a jacket," she said. "From Goodwill, 6 years ago." It was in the inside pocket. No note, no receipt, just there. He looked at the necklace for a long moment. She let him look. In 7 years of night shifts, Maya Chen had learned to read situations the way she read traffic. Not by analyzing every element consciously, but by absorbing the overall pattern and letting the pattern inform the response. The pattern here was not dangerous. It was not transactional. It was the pattern of someone standing in the presence of something they had not expected to encounter and had not yet found the right words for. She could wait. She had time. "My wife's name was Sarah," he said finally. "She died 8 years ago." A pause. "Tomorrow is the anniversary. I gave her that necklace in 2004, in Kyoto. The last thing I gave her before, at the hospital, was that necklace." He stopped. "It wasn't in her belongings when they returned them. I looked. I assumed it had been lost." Maya was very still. She looked down at her own chest. At the small silver ginkgo leaf she had been wearing for 6 years because a 9-year-old had picked it up and said it was pretty and she had not taken it off since. She thought about the Goodwill jacket. Army green, good condition, $7. The kind of jacket that ended up in a donation bin because someone's circumstances had changed and the jacket was no longer needed, or because someone had left it somewhere and it had made its way through the specific, invisible logistics of secondhand things to a rack on a Tuesday morning where Maya Chen had found it and paid $7 for it, and discovered, 3 days later, what was in the pocket. "Someone donated the jacket," she said. "I don't know who." "No," he said. "You wouldn't." He paused. "Sarah used to. She kept a bag in the car for donations. Clothes she had finished with. Sometimes things she picked up at thrift stores that she decided weren't right for her, but might be right for someone else." His voice was steady and careful in the way of someone who had learned, over 8 years, to talk about their wife without losing the thread of the sentence. "She was in that car when the accident happened." The warehouse hummed around them. A forklift moved somewhere in the back section, the sound of it distant and operational, the building continuing its ordinary function around a conversation that was anything but ordinary. Maya looked at the man standing 15 feet away with his clipboard and his anniversary and 8 years of not knowing where a $12 necklace had gone. She reached up. Her fingers found the clasp at the back of her neck. "Wait," he said, quickly. "Please, I don't want it back." He paused. "I don't mean that the way it sounds. I mean," he stopped, collected himself. "I spent 2 years looking for it. And then I stopped looking because some things you have to stop looking for, or they become the thing you can't stop doing." He looked at her. "And now it's here, on you. In my warehouse, on the anniversary." Another pause. "I don't think I'm supposed to take it back. I think I'm supposed to understand why it's here." Maya's hand dropped from the clasp. She looked at him for a moment. "My son found it," she said. "In the jacket, on the windowsill. He was 3. He picked it up and said it was pretty." She paused. "He's 9 now. He still notices it sometimes. Asks if it's still there." She paused again. "I don't know why I'm telling you that." "Because it matters," he said. "That it went somewhere it was noticed." His voice had something in it she recognized from a different context. The specific quality of someone saying a true thing out loud for the first time and hearing how it sounds. Sarah would have. He stopped. She would have liked that. The warehouse light fell between them. Neither of them moved. "I have 11 more stops," Maya said. "Not as an exit, as information." The same way she offered all information, plainly, without performance, making it available for him to do something with. He looked at her, at the necklace, at the woman who had been wearing his wife's necklace for 6 years in his city and working his warehouse route, and whom he had never once seen because he had not been in this building at 2 a.m. in 14 months and had only come tonight because the house was too quiet. I know, he said. I won't keep you. He paused. Can I ask you something first? She looked at him steadily. You can ask. How long have you been on shift? Since 9:30, she said. He looked at the clock on the warehouse wall. 2:19 a.m., nearly 5 hours, 43 stops. 11 remaining in a car she owned, on a route she had memorized. In a city she knew better at 2 a.m. than most people knew at noon. For 7 years. What's your name? He said. Maya Chen, she said. Driver ID 4471. 7 years on this route. She said it the way it appeared in his system. Name, ID, tenure. The language of a person who understood they were a data point in someone's database and had made peace with that, without making it the whole of what they were. He heard both things, the data point and the person. Daniel Reeves, he said. She looked at him, at the suit, at the clipboard, at the way the warehouse workers, who had appeared at the edges of the floor, had the specific, careful body language of people who recognized someone and were giving them space. You own this company, she said. Yes, he said. She nodded once. The nod of a person updating their understanding of a situation without letting the update change how they were standing in it. I have 11 stops, she said again. Go, he said. Please. She went. He watched her walk back to the CRV through the loading bay doors, the small silver ginkgo leaf visible for one more second in the warehouse light before the doors closed and the night took her back. He stood in the empty receiving area for a long time, the clipboard in his hands, the floor where it had fallen, the space where she had been standing. He thought about a donation bag in the back of a car on a wet road in March, about the specific, ordinary generosity of a woman who kept things moving toward the people who needed them. Clothes, necklaces, whatever was available, whatever might be right for someone else. Sarah had always been moving things toward people. She had moved him toward this company. She had moved a necklace toward a woman who wore it for 6 years because her son said it was pretty. He looked at the loading bay doors. Closed now. Maya Chen already on stop 44. 7 years of night shifts. 11 stops remaining. Home by 5 a.m. He thought about the 3,200 people whose names he did not know. He thought about what moving things toward people actually required of the people doing the moving. He thought about what he had not been looking at for 14 months. He picked up the clipboard. He walked to the operations office. He turned on the light. The operations office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a whiteboard with shift schedules written in 3 colors of marker, a coffee maker that looked like it had been through more shifts than most of the drivers. Daniel sat down at the desk and opened the laptop that lived there permanently. Not his laptop, the facility laptop, the one that ran the local operations system, and that he had not personally logged into in 14 months. He logged in. He pulled up driver records. Maya driver ID 4471. 7 years of service, 147 completed shifts, 94,203 individual deliveries. Average completion rate, 99. 3%. 4, 91 out of 5. Incidents, 0. He looked at those numbers for a long time. Not because they were surprising, because they were not surprising, because a 99. 3% completion rate over 7 years was not an accident, was not luck, was not the passive result of someone showing up and doing the minimum. It was the result of someone showing up and doing considerably more than the minimum, consistently, in conditions that the completion rate did not describe. He pulled up the compensation records. Base rate per delivery, $2.14 for residential, $3.40 for commercial. Night shift differential, 0, 18 per delivery. Added in 2021, after a driver coalition had submitted a formal request that had taken 11 months to be approved and had resulted in a differential that represented approximately 8% of base rate, 8%, for working between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. in a personal vehicle. He pulled up the vehicle policy. Apex Logistics did not provide vehicles for independent contractors. Contractors were required to maintain their own vehicles to company specification, model year 2010 or newer, 4-door, valid commercial insurance, current registration. The cost of meeting those specifications was borne entirely by the contractor. He had known this. It was policy he had approved. He had approved it in 2017 during a cost structure review in which the operations team had presented 3 models for the contractor fleet, and he had chosen the one that optimized for company margin. He had reviewed the numbers, approved the model, moved to the next agenda item. He had not thought about what the model looked like from the other side of it. He pulled up the insurance requirements. Commercial vehicle insurance for independent contractors. Minimum $500,000 liability. Average annual premium in Ohio for this coverage, $2,200 to $2,800. Not reimbursed by Apex. Not offset. Borne entirely by the contractor as a cost of operating. He wrote that number on the whiteboard, $2,200. Minimum. He pulled up the maintenance cost data. Not Apex data, there wasn't any, because Apex didn't track contractor vehicle maintenance costs, because they weren't Apex's costs. He searched industry data. Average annual vehicle maintenance cost for a high-mileage delivery vehicle in active commercial use, $3,400 to $4,800. He wrote that number on the whiteboard, $3,400. Minimum. He pulled up the gas cost calculation. Average miles per shift for a Columbus residential commercial route, 87 miles, 5 shifts per week. Average fuel efficiency for a 2011 Honda CR-V, 24 miles per gallon. Average gas price in Columbus current month DUF, $3.41 per gallon. He did the math. Threes. 41 divided by 24 miles per gallon, multiplied by 87 miles per shift, multiplied by 5 shifts per week, multiplied by 50 working weeks per year. He wrote the number on the whiteboard. $3,098. Annual fuel cost, approximate. He looked at the whiteboard. 3 numbers. 3 costs borne entirely by the contractor. $2,200. $3,400. $3,698 annually. Minimum. He pulled up Maya's annual earnings from Apex, $47,340. Gross. Before tax. He subtracted $38,642. Net of vehicle costs before income tax. He sat with that number. 38,600 and shifts 42 to shifts over 7 years, which averaged out roughly to 64 shifts per year, which was 5 shifts per week for 50 weeks, which was 10 hours per shift, which was 2,640 hours annually. 38,642 hours divided by 2,640 hour, 64 per hour. He wrote it on the whiteboard and underlined it, 64. Ohio minimum wage, $10.45. He was paying above minimum wage. The operations team had presented this fact in the last contractor compensation review as evidence of competitive position. Columbus living wage for a single adult with 1 child, according to MIT's living wage calculator, $28.31 per hour. He wrote that number on the whiteboard, $28.31. He looked at the 2 numbers, $14.64, $28.31. The gap between them was not a rounding error. It was not a market fluctuation. It was a structural feature. A gap built into the model he had approved in 2017 during a cost structure review in which the operations team had presented 3 models, and he had chosen the one that optimized for company margin. He had chosen it. He pulled up the 2017 cost structure review, found the slide. 3 models, Model A, B, C. He had chosen Model B. Model B was the middle option, not the most aggressive margin, not the most generous contractor compensation. The balanced approach, the operations team had called it, balancing company interests and contractor interests. He looked at the numbers now. Model B had balanced company interests against contractor interests by setting the contractor compensation at a level that produced a $14.64 effective hourly rate for a contractor with 1 child in Columbus, Ohio. He did not know in 2017 what that number meant in practical terms. He had not calculated it. He had looked at the margin and the rate and the competitive positioning, and had moved to the next agenda item. He knew now what it meant. It meant Maya Chen, working 10 hours a night, 5 nights a week for 7 years, was earning $14.64 an hour effective in a city where the living wage for her family was $28.31. It meant the 99.3% completion rate and the 4.91 customer rating and the 0 incidents and the 7 years and the 94,203 deliveries had been produced by a person operating at roughly half the wage that the city she was operating in required to live without the specific, grinding mathematics of not enough. He thought about the sandwich she had mentioned in passing during a conversation he had not yet had. He would have it. He understood that the night was not finished, and understood without being told that the sandwich was the same sandwich every night, because efficiency was what the math allowed, and the math did not allow waste. He thought about the CRV with 187,000 miles. He thought about a note on a kitchen table from a 9-year-old. He thought about a necklace that had traveled from a donation bag in the back of a car to a Goodwill jacket, to a windowsill, to a child's hands, to a woman's neck, to a warehouse, where the man who had put it in the original hands was sitting at a desk, looking at a whiteboard with 4 numbers on it. $14.
64.
31. $38,642. He looked at the whiteboard for a long time. Then he took a photo of it on his phone. Not for the meeting he was already planning. For himself. Because he had learned, in 8 years of running a company, that the things you photographed were the things you were committing to not forgetting, and he was committing to not forgetting this. He opened a new document on the laptop. He started typing, not a memo, not a policy proposal, a list, the specific immediate list of someone who has understood something and is not willing to let the understanding become abstract. Night shift differential. Current, 8%. Research, what does actual cost recovery require? Vehicle maintenance program, company contribution. Model options, insurance offset. Partial premium coverage for contractors over 12 months tenure. Living wage analysis, all contractor classifications, all markets. Leo Chen, 9 years old. Leaves notes for his mother before bed. He stopped at the last line, read it back, left it there. Because the list needed to contain the reason for the list. And the reason for the list was not the whiteboard numbers, not the cost structure review from 2017, not the margin optimization of Model B. The reason was a 9-year-old who left notes for his mother before bed, because his mother worked nights, and he had found a way to be present for her in the hours she was gone. And that specific, small, enormous act of love was being funded at $14.64 an hour. Daniel Reeves sat in the operations office of his own warehouse at 3:07 in the morning and looked at the list and understood that the company Sarah had told him to build was not finished. He had built the structure. He had not yet built what the structure was supposed to serve. He had more work to do. Maya finished her shift at 4:47 a.m., not 5 a.m. 4:47, 13 minutes ahead of schedule, because stop 49 had been a commercial drop with a loading dock that had cooperated for once, and stop 52 had been an apartment building where the resident had actually been awake and had come down to the lobby, which saved the 4 minutes of waiting and the 2 trips back to confirm the delivery. 13 minutes. She sat in the CRV in the Apex lot and wrote the final numbers in the notebook before she drove home, because she had learned in year 1 that numbers written immediately were accurate and numbers written later were approximations. And she did not deal in approximations. 54 stops, 91 miles, 7 hours, 17 minutes, 3 customer notes, 2 positive, 1 asking about a missing package that wasn't hers to answer, but that she had photographed the delivery confirmation for at 11:42 p.m. and had already submitted through the app. She closed the notebook. She sat for a moment in the way she always sat at the end of a shift, not recovering, not resting, just allowing the transition. 7 hours of continuous forward motion, of addresses and packages and timing, and the specific physical management of a body doing demanding work in cold weather. And then stillness, the engine idling, the lot quiet, the sky not yet light but changed from the full dark of midnight to the specific, preparatory gray of 4:47 a.m. in November. Almost morning, not yet. She thought about the man in the warehouse. She had been thinking about him on and off since stop 44. Not continuously, not in the way of something unresolved, but in the background way of something significant that had not yet been fully processed. She had learned to do that with things that required processing, to set them running in the background while the foreground handled what the foreground required, to trust that the processing would be complete by the time she had space to look at it directly. She had space now. She looked at it. A man who owned the company she worked for had been standing in his own warehouse at 2 a.m. because his wife had died 8 years ago and tomorrow was the anniversary and the house was too quiet. He had seen a necklace on her neck that he had placed in his wife's hand in a hospital room. He had not taken it back. He had said, "I think I'm supposed to understand why it's here." She reached up and touched the necklace. The silver was cold from the night air. She thought about the jacket, the Goodwill rack, the $7, the inside pocket. She thought about the woman who had worn the jacket before her. Not abstractly, but specifically, in the way she thought about all the people whose lives had preceded hers in the things she owned. The woman who had kept a donation bag in her car, who had, according to her husband, been in the habit of moving things toward people who might need them. The necklace had moved toward Maya, toward Leo, technically. Leo had been the one who picked it up and said it was pretty and changed the trajectory of where it went next. She thought about what the man had said. She would have liked that. The specific way he had said it. Present tense construction, past reference, the grammatical compromise of someone who had been navigating that particular tension for 8 years and had found the form that was most honest. She would have liked that. Not she would have liked that. She would have liked that. Maya understood, in the way she understood things that arrived complete rather than in pieces, that what he had meant was, the necklace finding its way to a child who noticed it was the exact kind of thing his wife would have wanted to happen. And that knowing it had happened was the first thing in 8 years that had given him somewhere to put the not knowing. She started the car. She drove home through a Columbus that was beginning, tentatively, to consider morning. The first delivery trucks on the highway, the early shift workers at the gas stations, the specific thin population of a city between its night version and its day version, belonging to neither. She knew this hour. She had lived in this hour for 7 years. She pulled into her building's lot at 5:03 a.m. She sat in the car for a moment before going up. Not from tiredness. She was tired. She was always tired at this hour. But tiredness was not the variable that determined how long she sat. It was the transition. The specific, necessary moment of moving from the person who drove 91 miles alone in the dark to the person who walked into an apartment where a 9-year-old was sleeping and where a note waited on the kitchen table. She needed a moment between those two people. She took it. Then she went upstairs. The note was on the table. She saw it before she turned on the kitchen light. She knew exactly where it would be because it was always exactly there, in the center of the table, folded once, her name on the outside. She turned on the light. She picked it up. "The cat is mad because you were late. I told him you were working. He said that's what you always say." I said it's true. He said he knows. "Hi, Mom. I saved you the last of the soup." She read it twice. She did what she always did. Folded it, put it in her jacket pocket with the others. Then she went to the refrigerator. The soup was in a small container with a lid, labeled in Leo's handwriting. "Mom's, do not eat." The cat already tried. She heated it on the stove, stood at the counter while it warmed. The apartment quiet around her in the specific way it was quiet at 5 a.m. Not empty, inhabited, Leo's presence filling it even in sleep. The specific gravity of a child that changed the quality of a space just by being in it. She ate the soup at the kitchen table. It was vegetable, which was not her favorite but was Leo's, which meant it appeared regularly. She had learned to like it over 7 years of him requesting it. She had learned a lot of things over 7 years that she had not expected to learn. How to change an alternator belt, how to read a loading dock schedule, how to be present in a conversation at 2 a.m. after 7 hours of driving when presence was the last thing her body had available, how to eat soup at 5 a.m. and mean it. She thought about Daniel Reeves in his operations office. She had seen the light on when she left, the small window of the office visible through the loading bay, the specific yellow rectangle of it against the dark of the exterior wall. He had been in there. She had not stopped to look in. She had 11 stops remaining, and she had not stopped, but she had noted it. She noted everything. She finished the soup. She washed the bowl because Leo had made the soup, and washing the bowl was the minimum reciprocity the gesture deserved. She went to the doorway of Leo's room. He was still on his right side, still with the arm hanging, still in the specific, boneless sleep of a child who had gone to bed with complete confidence that the world would still be there when he woke up, because it always was. Because she made sure it always was. She stood there for a moment longer than usual, not from worry. From the specific, full feeling of 5 a.m. After a shift that had contained more than shifts usually contained. The 43rd stop, the warehouse light, the necklace, the man with the anniversary. The word tomorrow used to mean a day that had already arrived and that she was already inside of. She touched the necklace. The silver had warmed from 7 hours against her skin. She thought about a woman she had never met who had kept a donation bag in her car and had moved things toward people who might need them. She thought about what it meant that the thing that had moved toward Maya was still moving, still warm, still here, still noticed by a 9-year-old who checked for it sometimes and asked if it was still there. It was still there. She went to bed at 5:19 a.m. She set the alarm for 9:30 p.m., labeled it, as always, go. She was asleep in 4 minutes. In the operations office of the Apex Logistics warehouse on Morse Road, the light was still on. Daniel Reeves was still at the desk. He had not gone home. He had a list. He had work to do. Leo Chen woke up at 7:12 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm. He always woke up before the alarm, not because he was a light sleeper. He slept with the complete, trusting unconsciousness of a child who had never had reason to doubt that the world would be there when he opened his eyes. He woke up early because his body had learned, over 9 years of being Leo Chen, that the 3 minutes before the alarm were his, the specific, private window before the day made its demands, before school and breakfast, and the logistics of being a person in the world required his attention. He used those 3 minutes to think, not about anything specific. Just the ambient thinking of a child who was comfortable in his own head, ideas moving through without agenda, the particular freedom of a mind that had not yet been taught to organize itself for productivity. At 7:14, the alarm went off. He turned it off. He lay still for 1 more minute. Then he got up. The first thing he did every morning was check the kitchen. Not for food. He knew what was in the kitchen. He had largely put it there himself when Mrs. Patterson brought him home from school, and he had assessed the refrigerator situation with the practical thoroughness of someone who understood that dinner did not make itself. He checked the kitchen for his mother. She was not there. She was never there at 7:15 a.m. She was asleep behind the closed bedroom door in the specific deep sleep of someone who had come home at 5 a.m. and would not surface until mid-afternoon. He knew this. He had known it for as long as he could remember knowing things. It was simply how mornings were organized. He was awake, she was asleep, and the apartment was his for the 2 hours between his alarm and the school bus. He liked those 2 hours. He made toast. 2 slices, peanut butter on one, nothing on the other, because the nothing slice was for dipping into the peanut butter slice in a ratio he had determined through experimentation to be optimal. He ate standing at the counter because the table still had last night's note on it, and the note was his mother's, and he didn't move her things. He looked at the note while he ate. He had written it at 8:47 p.m. before bed, in the specific careful handwriting he used for the notes. Not his regular handwriting, which was fast and slightly chaotic, but the note handwriting, which was slow and deliberate because the notes deserved that. He had been writing them since he was 6, when he had decided, without being asked, that his mother should have something to find when she came home. He didn't remember making that decision. It was simply something he did. The way breathing was something he did. Not chosen each time, just continuous. He finished the toast. He got his backpack from his room. He checked the main zipper. Homework folder, pencil case, the library book he had renewed twice because he wasn't finished with it and had no intention of being finished with it until he was finished with it regardless of what the library's timeline said. Side pocket. Lunch, which he had made the night before. Sandwich, apple, the small bag of pretzels that was the one snack his mother kept consistently stocked because he liked them, and they were $1.89 at the dollar store 2 blocks over. He put the backpack on. He checked the time, 7:31. Bus at 7:44, 13 minutes. He went to the window. The window faced east, and in November the morning light came in low and gray and honest. The kind of light that didn't pretend things were warmer or easier than they were. Leo liked this light. He liked things that were honest about what they were. He looked at the succulent on the windowsill. Gerald. Named after Gerald, from the Elephant and Piggy books, which he had read so many times in first grade that the covers had come loose and his mother had taped them back with the specific matter-of-fact care she applied to things worth keeping. Gerald the succulent was objectively not thriving. He was also objectively still alive, which Leo considered an achievement worth acknowledging. He had been on that windowsill for 3 years. He had been knocked over twice, once by Leo's elbow and once by the window being opened too quickly in summer. Both times Leo had put him back. Both times Gerald had continued being alive, which Leo had decided was a personality trait rather than a coincidence. He looked at the necklace hook on the wall beside the window, empty. His mother wore the necklace on shift. She hung it on the hook when she came home. He had noticed it was gone when he checked before bed last night, which meant she was wearing it, which meant she was working, which he already knew because it was Tuesday. And Tuesday was always a shift night. He had found the necklace when he was 3. He did not remember finding it specifically. 3-year-old memories were not organized the way 9-year-old memories were organized. But he remembered the necklace on the window sill, which was where his mother had put it after finding it in the jacket. And he remembered picking it up and thinking it was pretty and saying so. And he remembered his mother putting it on. He remembered that clearly. The way she had looked at it in her hand for a moment before she put it on, not hesitating, just looking. The way she looked at things she was deciding to keep. She had kept it. She had worn it every shift since. He considered this a good decision. He considered most of his mother's decisions good decisions, not because he was uncritical. He was 9, not 6. He had opinions about things, but because he had been watching her make decisions for his entire life and had developed through observation a genuine respect for how she made them. Quickly, accurately, without the visible deliberation that suggested uncertainty. She knew what she knew, and she acted on it. He wanted to be like that. He was working on it. At 7:39, he put on his jacket. At 7:41, he took out a piece of paper from his notebook. He wrote the note standing at the kitchen table, which was where he always wrote it. Not sitting. Standing, because standing felt like the right posture for something he was leaving rather than something he was making for himself. He thought about what to write. Some nights the note wrote itself. The imaginary cat had done something, or he had a thought he wanted to share, or there was specific information to convey. Other nights it was simpler. Tonight was simpler. He wrote, "I checked on Gerald. He's fine. The necklace hook is empty, which means you were working, which means you were being a superhero again. Hi, Mom. Don't forget to eat something real." He folded it, wrote her name on the outside, put it in the center of the table. He looked at it for a moment. Then he picked up his backpack and went to school. Mrs. Patterson heard the front door close at 7:43 from her apartment upstairs and noted the time with the automatic precision of a woman who had been listening for that sound for 4 years. 1 minute before the bus. Good. She made herself tea. She thought about Maya, not with worry, with the specific steady warmth of someone who had watched a person do something difficult for a long time and had arrived through watching at a genuine admiration that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with recognition. She had raised 3 children alone, Mrs. Patterson. Different circumstances, different decade, same essential arithmetic. More going out than coming in, more needed than available, the specific daily negotiation of a life that required more than it provided and that you kept going anyway because the alternative was not a real alternative. She knew what Maya was doing. She knew what it cost. She had never said this to Maya directly. Maya did not need to be told that what she was doing was hard. She knew what she was doing was hard. What she needed was for Mrs. Patterson to be upstairs and available, and to take Leo on the days when the timing didn't work. And that was what Mrs. Patterson provided. Not words. Presence. Presence was underrated. She drank her tea at 9:30 a.m. when she was reasonably confident that Maya had been asleep long enough to have entered the deep sleep rather than the surface sleep. She went downstairs and slipped a piece of paper under the apartment door. A receipt from the bakery on 5th. 2 croissants, paid for. On the back she had written, "Pick up when you're up. They know your name." She had been doing this once a week for 2 years. Maya had never mentioned it. Neither had she. Some things worked best without being discussed. In the Apex Logistics warehouse on Morse Road, Daniel Reeves was still at the desk at 8:15 a.m. when his assistant called to ask if he was coming to the 9 a.m. board meeting. He looked at the whiteboard. $14, 620 TD, 38,642, two cyst. And below the list, the line he had written last and left, Leo Chen, 9 years old, leaves notes for his mother before bed. Cancel the 9 a.m., he said. The board members are all ready. Reschedule it, he said. Thursday. Same agenda, different number. He paused. I need to add something. He hung up. He looked at the whiteboard. He thought about a 9-year-old checking on a succulent named Gerald and writing a note in careful handwriting and putting it in the center of a table for a woman who would come home at 5 a.m. and find it and fold it and put it in her pocket. He thought about what that note cost Leo. Nothing, technically, and everything, actually. The way most things that mattered cost nothing technically and everything actually. He picked up the pen. He added one more line to the whiteboard. What does this company owe the people who make it run at 2 a.m.? He looked at it. Not a rhetorical question, a question with an answer. He was going to find it. She called him at 2 p.m., not because she had planned to, because she had woken up at 1:47, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with the note Leo had left and the receipt from Mrs. Patterson's bakery run, and had understood, in the specific, clear way, she understood things that had been processing in the background, that the conversation in the warehouse was not finished. She had his number because he had written it on a piece of paper before she left. Not a business card, a piece of paper torn from the operations clipboard. The same clipboard he had dropped and picked up and carried for the rest of their conversation, with the specific, slightly self-conscious awareness of a man who had done something involuntary in public and was deciding how to carry it. She had taken the paper without comment. She had put it in her jacket pocket. With the note, she called. He answered on the first ring. Mrs. Chen, he said. You were still in the office when I left, she said. I stayed, he said. Until when? 9 a.m., he said. I had a meeting I canceled. She absorbed that. A CEO who canceled a 9 a.m. board meeting because he had spent the night in his own operations office was either someone in the middle of a significant decision or someone performing one. She had spent the night considering which one and had arrived at a provisional conclusion that she was willing to revise if the evidence required it. Why are you calling? He said, not unkindly, directly in the register of someone who preferred the real question to the preamble. She appreciated that. Because I have things I didn't say last night, she said, and I think you need to hear them. A pause. Tell me, he said. She looked at the whiteboard numbers she didn't know about. She looked at the window where Gerald sat in the gray November light. She looked at Leo's note on the table. Last night you asked where I got the necklace, she said. You didn't ask how long I've been working your route. 7 years, he said. Driver ID 4471. 94,213 deliveries. She was quiet for a moment. He had looked her up. She noted that without judgment. 7 years, she confirmed. In my own car. On my own insurance. On my own maintenance schedule. She paused. My son was 2 when I started. He's 9 now. He's grown up making his own breakfast and getting himself to school and leaving notes on the kitchen table because his mother works nights and needs to sleep during the day. She paused again. I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. I'm telling you because you own the company that set the rate that made this the math. He was quiet. He said, from Fortin, 64 an hour effective, she said, after vehicle costs, before tax. She said it the way she said all numbers, plainly, without inflection, letting it be what it was. I know because I calculate it every month. In the notebook. The same one I use for everything else. Silence on the line, not the processing kind. The kind that meant he already knew the number. You calculated it too, she said. Last night, he said, on the whiteboard. And the living wage for Columbus for a single parent with 1 child is $28.31, he said. I know, I wrote it down. She looked at Gerald on the windowsill. Mr. Reeves, she said. Daniel, he said. Daniel, she said. I'm not calling to negotiate. I don't have a union. I don't have a representative. I have a notebook and 7 years of data and a son who leaves notes about an imaginary cat because it's the only way he knows how to be present for me while I'm gone. She paused. I'm calling because last night you said you thought you were supposed to understand why the necklace was here. And I think the answer is not about the necklace. Tell me what it's about, he said. It's about whether you actually see the people who run your company at 2 a.m., she said. Not the completion rate, not the customer rating, the people. She paused because Sarah, your wife, from everything you said about her, she saw people. She kept a donation bag in her car. She moved things toward people who needed them. The necklace got to me because she was the kind of person who made sure things got to where they were needed. She stopped. Is that the company she told you to build? The line was very quiet. She waited. She was good at waiting. No, he said, finally, quietly. The specific, unguarded honesty of someone who has been asked a direct question and has decided that the direct answer is the only one available. It's not. Then what are you going to do about it? She said. Not aggressively, not as a demand. The way she said everything that required a real answer, plainly, making it available, letting him do something useful with it or not. He was quiet for a moment. I have a list, he said. Tell me what's on it, she said. He told her. The night shift differential. Current 8% insufficient to cover actual cost differential of working nights. Research into what real cost recovery required and what a meaningful differential looked like. The vehicle maintenance program. Company contribution toward contractor vehicle maintenance for drivers with more than 12 months tenure. Not full coverage, real contribution. Enough to change the math without changing the business model. The insurance offset, partial premium coverage for commercial vehicle insurance, the number he had calculated, covering 40% of the average premium for tenured contractors, cost Apex approximately $1. $2 million annually against a revenue of $600 million. The living wage analysis, a full review of effective hourly rates for all contractor classifications across all 8 states, measured against local living wage benchmarks, not to immediately correct every gap, to see them accurately for the first time. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. The insurance offset, she said, 40% of average premium. Yes, he said. My premium is $2,400 a year, she said. 40% is $960. I know, he said. $960 is Leo's school activity fees for the year, she said. Every year I move it to the bottom of the list because the list has things that are more immediately urgent. She paused. It has never made it off the bottom of the list. He said nothing. It would make it off the list, she said. I know, he said. That's why it's on mine. She looked at the note on the kitchen table. Don't forget to eat something real. The differential, she said. You said research into what real cost recovery required. Yes, I have that research, she said. 7 years of it. In the notebook. A pause. I know, he said. That's why I'm asking if you'd be willing to be part of building this, not as a contractor giving feedback. As someone whose data and experience inform the actual policy. He paused. Pay for the work. At a rate that reflects what the work is worth. She looked at Gerald. Gerald sat in the gray November light, small and slightly lopsided from the time Leo had knocked him over and put him back not quite straight, still alive, still there, 3 years on the same windowsill. She thought about what it meant to be asked. Not what she needed. Not what the company could do for her, what she knew. What her 7 years had produced that was worth something beyond the 94,203 deliveries and the 491 rating and the 0 incidents. The notebook, the data, the specific ground-level understanding of what the work actually cost the people doing it, not the cost the company tracked, the cost that lived in the notebook and in the maintenance records, and in the bottom of the list where Leo's school activities had been sitting for 3 years. Nobody had asked for that before, he was asking. I have conditions, she said. Name them, he said. The work happens on my schedule, she said. I have a son and a route and a CRV that needs an oil change by Friday. Those things come first. Understood, he said. The notebook stays mine, she said. You can use the data. The notebook is mine. It should stay yours, he said, Ed. It always should have been yours, in the sense of being something someone wanted to read. I'm sorry it took 7 years. She absorbed that. Not the apology. She had no particular use for apologies that weren't attached to action. And this one had a list attached to it, So it was a different kind of apology. The acknowledgement. The specific honest acknowledgement of a man who had looked at the whiteboard numbers and understood, without being managed toward the understanding, what they meant. One more condition, she said. Tell me, he said. The first thing on the list, she said. The differential, the maintenance program, the insurance offset. Those don't wait for the full review. Those start now. A pause. Thursday, he said. Board meeting. I moved it to add this to the agenda. It goes in front of the board Thursday. And if the board pushes back, she said, then I make the case, he said. It's not the first time I've made a case the board didn't immediately want to hear. She thought about the 9 a.m. meeting he had canceled, about the whiteboard in the operations office, about a man who had driven across Columbus at midnight because the house was too quiet and had ended up in his own warehouse looking at numbers he should have looked at 7 years ago, about a necklace that had moved from a hospital room to a donation bag to a Goodwill jacket to a windowsill to a child's hands to a woman's neck to a warehouse ceiling light for exactly 1 second. Some things moved toward where they needed to be. Some people did too. Thursday, she said. Thursday, he confirmed. She ended the call. She sat at the kitchen table for a moment. Then she picked up Leo's note and read it one more time. Don't forget to eat something real. She went to the refrigerator. She took out the leftover soup. She heated it on the stove, standing at the counter, in the specific ordinary grace of a Tuesday afternoon that had started at 2:14 a.m. in a warehouse and had arrived here, at a kitchen counter, in November light, with a note in her pocket and a list in someone else's hands and a necklace warm against her collarbone. She ate the soup. She meant it. The board meeting started at 9 a.m. and ran until 12:47 p.m. Daniel had expected 3 hours. He had prepared for 4. It ran 3 hours and 47 minutes, which was in the range he had anticipated and which he had communicated to his assistant on Wednesday afternoon, so that the afternoon was clear and the people who needed to be available after the meeting were available. He had learned, in 8 years of running Apex, that the meetings that mattered required clearance on both sides. There were 11 board members. 7 had read the materials he had sent Wednesday evening. The whiteboard numbers, the living wage analysis, the contractor cost structure breakdown, the proposed changes to the night shift differential, and the vehicle maintenance program and the insurance offset. 4 had not read the materials, or had read them partially, and were encountering the full picture for the first time in the room. He could tell which was which from the first 5 minutes. The ones who had read it were quiet in the specific way of people who had already done their processing and were ready to discuss. The ones who hadn't read it were quiet in the different way of people absorbing something significant and buying time. He gave them time. He presented the numbers the way he had written them on the whiteboard. Plainly, in sequence, without the softening language that financial presentations typically use to make difficult numbers more comfortable to receive. Not cost pressures, not market dynamics, not strategic repositioning. Numbers, what they meant, what they required. $14, 64 effective hourly rate, $28, 31 living wage, the gap. He said, this gap is not a market condition. It is a policy decision we made in 2017 and have not revisited. I am proposing we revisit it. Margaret Osei, the board member who had been on Apex since year 2, and who Daniel trusted more than anyone else in that room to tell him what she actually thought rather than what she thought he wanted to hear, looked at the numbers for a long moment. The insurance offset, she said. 1, $2 million annually. Yes, Daniel said. Against $600 million revenue, she said. 2%, Daniel said. I calculated it. I calculated it too, Margaret said. She looked at him. What took you so long? The room was quiet. Daniel looked at her. I wasn't looking, he said. Margaret held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded. The specific nod of someone who has received an honest answer and is deciding it is sufficient. What changed? She said. He thought about a warehouse at 2 a.m., about a clipboard on a floor, about a necklace in a November light. I went to the warehouse, he said. I looked. The pushback came from 3 board members. Robert Shan, CFO background, the predictable concerns about margin compression and investor expectation, and the precedent set by increasing contractor compensation. The specific reasonable objections of someone whose professional training oriented him toward protecting the current structure and who needed to be shown that the current structure had costs that didn't appear in the margin calculation. Daniel showed him, not with persuasion. With the data from Maya's notebook, anonymized, presented as contractor survey data, which it was, from a survey of one person over 7 years, the maintenance costs, the insurance premiums, the fuel calculations, the effective hourly rate arrived at from the bottom up rather than the top down. Robert looked at the numbers. This is one contractor, he said. This is one contractor who documented it, Daniel said. The conditions are consistent across the contractor base. She documented what the others know. Robert was quiet. The second objection came from Patricia Lowe, who raised the question of whether improving contractor compensation set a precedent that would affect the independent contractor classification, the legal distinction that allowed Apex to use contractors rather than employees, avoiding the benefits and protections that came with employment. Daniel had anticipated this. He had spent Wednesday afternoon with the company's employment attorneys, specifically on this question, specifically because he knew it would be raised and he did not want to be in the position of having promised something he couldn't legally deliver. The attorneys had been clear. The proposed changes, a company-funded vehicle maintenance contribution, an insurance offset, an increased night differential, were compatible with contractor classification under current Ohio law, structured as company-funded programs rather than employer-provided benefits. The distinction was real, and the attorneys had confidence in it. He presented this. Patricia was not entirely satisfied. She was also not wrong to raise it. It was a real legal question that deserved a real legal answer, and he had provided one. She noted her concern for the record. He noted it with her. The third objection came from James Whitfield, who had the longest tenure on the board after Margaret, and who raised a question Daniel had not fully anticipated. Not about the cost or the legal structure, but about the scope. This addresses Columbus, James said. You have operations in 8 states. If you implement this in Columbus and not elsewhere, you have a consistency problem. If you implement it everywhere simultaneously, the cost is not 1, 2 million. He looked at the materials, closer to 9 million annually, fully scaled. Daniel looked at him. He said, 9 million is 5% of revenue, James said. I know, Daniel said. I calculated it. And your position is? Daniel looked at the board, 11 people, some of whom had built things, some of whom had funded things, all of whom had, at some point in their professional lives, made a decision that optimized one variable at the cost of another variable they had either not measured or chosen not to measure. He thought about a whiteboard. He thought about a question he had written on it at 3 a.m. and left there. What does this company owe the people who make it run at 2 a.m.? My position, he said, is that we start in Columbus. We measure the impact on contractor retention, on delivery quality, on the operational outcomes that translate to revenue. We build the case internally that the investment produces returns that justify the scale, and then we scale. He paused. Not because it's the fastest way to do the right thing, because it's the way to do the right thing that produces a company that can keep doing it. The room was quiet. Margaret looked at him. You're not asking us to do this because it's good for the company, she said. No, he said. You're asking us to do it because it's right, she said. And you're making the case that it's also good for the company. Yes, he said. Those are 2 different arguments, she said. I know, he said. I'm making both. Margaret looked at the numbers one more time. Then she looked at the room. I'm voting yes, she said. The math is sound and the principle is sound. And frankly, the only thing I want on the record from me today is that we should have had this conversation in 2017. She paused. We didn't. We're having it now. Let's not spend the next hour discussing why we didn't have it then. The vote was 8-3. Robert Shan voted no. Patricia Lowe voted no, with her concern noted for the record. A third member, newer to the board, voted no on the grounds that he wanted more data before committing to the full package rather than a phased approach. A position Daniel understood and had some sympathy for and had ultimately decided not to accommodate, because phasing the approach was a way of making the decision feel smaller than it was. 8-3. Columbus implementation, 90 days. Night shift differential increased from 8% to 22%. The number Maya's notebook had indicated was required for real cost recovery. Vehicle maintenance contribution. $150 per month for contractors with 12 months or more tenure. Insurance offset 40% of average commercial vehicle insurance premium for tenured contractors. Living wage review for all contractor classifications. Initiated, results due in 6 months. He called her at 1:15 p.m. She answered on the second ring. 8 to 3, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Which 3? She said. He told her. The phased approach objection, she said. That's the one that could have killed it. I know, he said. Why didn't you accommodate it? Because accommodating it would have made the decision feel optional, he said. And it's not optional. It's the right thing, and it should feel like the right thing. He paused. Your notebook made that case better than I could have made it myself. I used it in the room. She was quiet again. The maintenance contribution, she said. $150 a month. Yes, he said. My CRV needs an oil change by Friday, she said. It costs $67. I know, he said. That would have come out of the list, she said. It would have displaced something. I know, he said. It won't anymore. She was quiet for a long time, not processing. Something else. The specific quality of quiet that followed the arrival of something that had been on the bottom of a list for a very long time and had finally, in a Thursday afternoon phone call, made it to a place where it didn't have to be on the list anymore. Daniel, she said. Yes, he said. Your wife told you to build something, she said. Yes, he said. I think this is part of it, she said. He looked at the whiteboard. Still there. The numbers, the list, the question at the bottom. What does this company owe the people who make it run at 2A? Below it, in the space where the answer went, he had written nothing. He picked up the marker. He wrote, more than it has been giving. He looked at it. Then he wrote one more line beneath it. Start now. Yes, he said. I think so too. 90 days later, Maya Chen's alarm went off at 9:30 p.m. She silenced it, got up, dressed in the dark, checked on Leo. Right side, arm hanging, breathing steady and complete. The note was on the table. Gerald is thriving. I've decided that's what it looks like. The cat says hi. Hi, Mom. She folded it. Pocket, went downstairs to the CRV. Oil change done Friday, on time. Paid from the maintenance contribution that had appeared in her Apex account on the first of the month. $150, labeled Vehicle Maintenance Program, Contractor Benefit. She had looked at that word for a long time. Benefit, 7 years. First time it had applied to her in any document Apex produced. She drove into Columbus at 9:58. Same route, same streets, same city. She knew better at 2 a.m. than most people knew at noon. The CRV moving through it with 189,000 miles and a new oil filter, and the reliable hum of something maintained with attention. She touched the necklace at the first red light. Cold silver, ginkgo leaf, still here. At 2:09 a.m., she pulled into the Apex warehouse on Morse Road, 43rd stop. She leaned forward to sign the screen. The warehouse light caught the necklace for exactly 1 second. She straightened up, reached for the next package, kept moving. 6 miles away, Daniel Reeves slept through November 12th for the first time in 8 years. When he woke at 6:47, he lay still for a moment. Not with the loop, not with the voicemail, just with the quiet of a man who had finally given grief somewhere to go besides inward. He got up, made coffee, thought about Sarah, not with if, with gratitude. He had more building to do, that was enough. On a kitchen table across the city, a folded note waited in the center. A name on the outside in careful handwriting, written by a 9-year-old who had found a way to be present for his mother in every hour she was gone. Still there, still enough.